Hey, it's Drybear. We're just past a week for the early access of Path of Exile 2, and following major nerfs to everyone's favorite build, and all kinds of things going on, people have been wondering what Grinding Gear Games is going to do moving forward, and they just a few minutes ago put out a list of all of their changes coming up in the next patch, and I think you're going to be pretty happy about the list. Now, a lot of this started with just some major complaints around the game itself, issues with the Trial of Sekhemas causing people to lose honor. Like, basically, if you've ever done the Trial of Sekhemas, if you take damage during it, there's only a certain amount of HP you can lose before you lose the trial in general, which a lot of people felt was unfair to melee characters versus ranged characters, especially ranged characters that have minions that can sit back and avoid getting hit, whereas the melee characters really have to get up in front and center and risk being hit a lot more in order to do the trial. And it's not just about getting your ascendancy points, as the Trial of Sekhemas becomes a late game activity for farming once you get to the Atlas endgame, and so a lot of people were concerned about that. Additionally, one of the builds last week was dominating the leaderboards, a Stormweaver cast on freeze build that was causing lots and lots of damage and clear, and basically the top 20 slots for the top 1000 leaderboards were all Stormweaver sorceresses, and they ended up getting nerfed pretty hard, like nuked pretty hard last week, which left a lot of people wondering, can I respec? What's going on? What are the costs here? So they're going to address all those problems, at least in this list that we see here, and try to just, you know, hey, we made mistakes. Here's what we're going to do. This isn't a full list of changes. They'll have patch notes later. This is just their post going over what they plan to do. So first, I say we'll be adding capacity to fast travel between checkpoints and adding more checkpoints on the map as well. These are these little checkpoints that you walk up to and unlock. And once you do that, they're going to be adding the functionality in a future patch very soon to be able to teleport between them. So if you find the next zone while you're moving through, at least especially during campaign, or you find a spot you want to travel to, you can then leave that checkpoint, go somewhere else, search the rest of the map, and when you're ready, teleport to the checkpoint you left behind, which saves you a bunch of time and helps a lot with the massive sprawling maps in many of the areas that are just really, really big, especially for the slower moving characters that can't traverse them as quickly. So teleporting between checkpoints is coming, and it's going to be an awesome change. They'll also be making the passive point respecking cheaper. On average, it's going to be about 40 to 50% cheaper overall. What they're doing is they're taking the exponential curve of cost that it is now. As you get higher and higher level, every level that you gain makes your respec per node go up, 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 until eventually, you know, when you're level 50, 60, 70, 80, the costs get ridiculous. And so what they're doing is they're taking that exponential curve and they're flattening it down and putting a cap on it so that it's a little bit more smooth. It doesn't ramp up suddenly. You have 10,000, 15,000 gold per node respec. It's going to be much flatter, and then it consumes, like, it just goes up a little bit more linearly as you get towards the end game and a higher level, which they said will result in about 50%, 40 to 50% less gold for respecking. Next, they will be updating the Trial of Sekhemas to be more forgiving for melee players, and the way they're going to solve this is that not only are they fixing a bug with damage over time, there's clips of people taking like just a tickle of the flamethrowers in Trial of Sekhemas and then losing all of their honor in one go. They say that was a bug, and they have that addressed in the upcoming patch, but they're now going to make it so that the amount of damage you take is based on how far away you are from the enemy, up to 35% less honor damage taken if you're in melee range. So melee players can just walk up to the enemy, and if they do get hit without dodging or dealing with it in some way, the amount of honor damage taken on your honor total will be less than if you were far away and get hit by something in general. They also fixed a couple of the animations and monster effects, so the skitter golems would no longer use basic attacks and instead will just explode. Serpent Clan's burrow and ambush attack now has improved visual. Right now they'll burrow in the ground and then they'll pop up an attack, which was like a sudden attack. If you didn't know that they burrowed or you weren't paying attention, you could take honor damage that way, which is going to be really great. And then the volcanoes from the Rattle Cage's Fisher Slam now last half the duration, which is going to be great. So the final boss in the Trial of Sekhemas, when you're trying to do it, won't have these as many volcano things going around while you're dodging the falling rocks and the big AoEs and the slams. You'll just be able to deal with the volcanoes a little bit easier. Next, there's a lot of outcry for some of the endgame mechanics, chaos damage, doing too much, volatile crystals. Absolutely, like, I feel like volatile crystals is probably the highest rate of deaths, like the #1 cause of deaths among all exiles everywhere. That's where the crystals explode. And there's even the plants that spawn the volatile crystals that explode that just do ridiculous amounts of damage. So they're basically going to make some endgame updates to make the game a little bit more enjoyable for the endgame overall. First is maps no longer have additional elemental resistance penalties inherently applied at tier 6 and tier 11 or higher. So they feel like it was hard enough without that. So they're going to be removing that to just make it a little bit smoother. Chaos damage now also scales less aggressively over the end game, so you don't need as much chaos resistance. You will still need it, but you don't need as much as you did in the current state. They also mentioned that critical strikes from monsters now deal 40% less bonus damage. They mentioned this in the map section, so I don't know if this is going to be a global game-wide change or this is going to be only in map encounters. Will it be less bonus damage? It's where it matters the most, to be honest, but it'll be curious to see if they apply this retroactively to the whole game by making crits a little bit less jarring when you get whacked by one. They've also lowered the baseline monster density of the breach encounters, the frequency of the elite monsters that appear, just to make breach a little bit more usable overall. They've disabled the volatile crystals modifier. They just say, we give up. Yes, it sucks. We're not fans of it anyways. They're going to disable volatile crystals from spawning at all as a modifier, which I think is going to be a huge boon for basically every build in general. And they also made it so the purple explosives from the volatile plants that they shoot out that just follow you forever until they get detonated, they are going to make it so that the purple explosives on rare monsters now deal significantly less damage. There's actually a ton of clips of people killing a rare, getting some great drops, walking over to it, forgetting there were volatile crystals or volatile crystals from the plants, and then grabbing the items and dying instantly because of what's on the ground. So that being reduced in damage is nice. And they also, one of my favorite changes in this whole patch, the Siphon Flask charges modifier on monsters now drains 1/10 the amount that it drained before. This was one of the worst affixes. If you got Siphon Flasks with the Siphon Mana Aura, it was basically just run away because depending on your build, it was just so unbelievably painful to face. So it's going to be 1/10 the amount of drain of flash charges. Previously, it took maybe 2 or 3 seconds to fully drain all of your flash charges before. So hopefully that means that it's going to take 20 to 30 seconds to fully drain all of your flash charges with the Siphon flash charges. That should make it way more enjoyable to face, a lot, especially if it lines up with things like Siphon Mana as well. They're also going to make some changes to character and item balance, things that just aren't working right now. And you'll see in a second, we're going to be doing skill and support gems as well. So they made charm modifiers and belts more common. The meme right now is that every belt in the game only has 1 charm slot in general. They're going to make it so that symbolism modifier is level 23 and onward, and inscription modifier is 64 onward, so it's a little bit easier to get those. They're going to make it so electrocute has harder, more difficult to build up electrocute, but they're also going to remove the damage penalty from the support gem that helps with that. They're also going to add a new lightning damage and electrocute cluster to the passive tree between ranger and monk, so the top right corner. Hopefully this gives us a little bit more option. I mean, lightning ranger right now is doing incredibly well. There are a lot of monk builds on Invoker that are doing well, but then maybe this gives us a little bit more variety when it comes to the lightning monk specifically. They're also going to make it more difficult to chain freeze enemies by reducing the amount of freeze buildup applied after a freeze has been applied. So the same functionality that you would see from like a heavy stun. After you've been heavy stunned, there's this reduced amount of stun buildup, so you can't heavy stun, heavy stun, heavy stun. They're doing this, I think, because the game is designed to be a little bit more like direct and discreet with its combat, but if you have permit stuns or constant CC like freeze, it kind of ruins that for a lot of people, and so they're affecting freeze in general as that, and they're also doing the same thing for electrocute, though it's not quite as rampant as freeze is right now. They're also making it so the Hunter's Talisman Notable grants 1+ charm slot, and the small passive skills leading up to it now grant the stat it formerly gave. So the charm helper text has been updated to indicate that you can have more than 3 charms unlocked, so you can hopefully get to 4 charms. And if you didn't know, we did some charm testing recently. Charms actually queue up. So if you did, you say 3 of the same charm, like, stun immunity or freeze immunity, it will consume one, and then when the effect is over, it's now available to consume the next one. So you could presumably put 3 stun immunities in a row. So you get stunned, it eats it, you get stunned, it eats it, you get stunned, it eats it. So having 4 charm slots does make things kind of interesting. They're also going to be doing some changes to skill and support gems, both in the positive and negative direction, and some really cool ones in here, things that I think that a lot of people have been asking for a while. They do apologize that we made mistakes. We did want to make sure that anything that's overpowered gets nerfed quickly, but maybe they reacted too quickly, and generally they do like to make sure that when they do make these meta changes, that they come during a large content patch with a new league, not during it. And the special exception here is that it's early access, but they recognize that a lot of people are frustrated with the Sorc changes that went by. So hopefully with these changes, the acknowledgement of that issue as well as the lower respec costs should help everything a little bit more smoothly in that idea. But they are looking at underperforming skill gems and support gems. And what's pretty crazy is I've been making some builds for a lot of these that are now just going to be flat out buffed. So a lot of the builds that I've been making over the last week are now just going to be generally better, which is crazy. But they're making improvements to rolling slam and all shield skills in the mace section. So the resonating strike, shield charge, shield wall, all of those are going to get better, which means that, you know, the slam build I just put out and the shield build that I put out a couple days ago, both those are about to get buffed, which is kind of wild. For bow skills, especially the skills used to generate frenzy charges are all getting buffed. They don't mention which ones here, but I'm guessing all of the non-vine, poison, or electric bow skills that weren't really being used as much are going to get buffed, which is great. Bone spells and chaos damage over time spells in the occult section, not in the monk section, are going to get buffed up there as well. This is great because a lot of people have wanted to make bone mages or bone witches, but they can't because they're just not quite as good. And some of the chaos damage as well is kind of weak and a little bit sparse along the tree as well. They're going to make various crossbow skills better, especially those at higher tiers. We'll have to see which ones they do. And they're also going to improve some of the underachieving quarterstaff abilities. So some of those across the board. So ranger, witch, warrior, as well as monk and mercenary, all getting a lot of their main skills that weren't being used as much buffed in the next patch. Additionally, they're also looking at support gems. So they're going to be looking at, you know, improvements in future support gems, but they're also going to be adding 2 new support gems with this new patch, which is going to be crazy. They're going to be adding in the Tremors support gem, which means that if you're a warrior doing aftershocks, you will have a support gem that causes multiple new aftershocks with a damage penalty on it, so you can aftershock like crazy. This will affect my slam build from today, basically. They're also going to be adding a bidding support gem, which allows you to increase the effectiveness of command skills, so the active abilities for minions in the witch category. So you'll actually be able to make your minions even stronger with this, and hopefully this generally just makes minion builds a lot more powerful. They're also going to be making it so the fire exposure, lightning exposure, and cold exposure support gems no longer penalize damage of supported skills. Instead, they will now have a mana cost multiplier, and they did mention that they might want to be doing this with the other ones, like the fire, ice, and lightning addition of damage, where it just makes it so you have less or no elemental damage. They might be easing up on those, but specifically the exposure gems, they're going to make those a little bit easier so that it doesn't penalize damage, it just makes it cost more mana. They do also mention that unfortunately they will be targeting a couple overachieving skills that they feel are overpowered and just doing too much. Skeletal Arsonist spirit costs now match the other 2 skeletal mages, and it results in a slight decrease in the number of arsonists at a high level play, focused primarily on the infernalist builds we're seeing right now. A nerf to the damage over time component on very high levels of tornado and vine arrow for the poison pathfinder build that we're seeing. These were never intended to be dealing damage themselves, but more as a way for like a catalyst for other abilities. So they'll be doing the damage down on tornado and vine arrow. And then magnetic salvo can now only use your stuck lightning arrows as opposed to those created by your party members, which some people were using in large groups to absolutely obliterate targets in group play. So they're going to target that specifically. And they say thanks for all the support. They apologize for some of the awkwardness, but they're still chugging along. They're adding new content. They're working on new classes, but let me know what you think about the patch notes here, the general vibe of this. And of course, we'll cover the actual line items once we get a full patch notes for that as well. But let me know what you think about this going forward. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people. And don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.